It is now my pleasure to welcome Professor Teresa Longo, Senior International Officer, and her panel to discuss everyday practice of diplomacy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Longo. It's great to see everybody here. I am with three stellar panelists. We have two people who have been devoting their careers, their life careers, to public service, and one who has incredible experience in youth summits and the arts. What I hope for this session is that we have a cross-generational conversation, something I think is very important and has in fact been in place during the day. My process will be to ask a few questions to the panelists, and as we have been doing, then turn over questions to the audience. I'm going to start with Beth. Beth, you have had an extraordinary career as a diplomat. And a few days ago, I had a conversation online on Zoom with Beth, and I said, so, if you could start this over again and do it all again, would you? And the answer was yes, in a heartbeat and a huge smile. It was really cool. So I would like you, please, to start by maybe giving us a story behind that confident yes that you provided the other day.
So the story that I thought I'd tell relates to NATO. It was when we were doing the NATO enlargement, the second enlargement, which was the large one in the early 2000s. And the goal was to get these countries that were NATO wannabes prepared to join not only the military aspect of NATO, but the like-minded nation part of NATO. And one of the elements of that was to ensure that all the countries understood that minorities, their minority groups in their populations, had to be respected, that their role had to be solidified legislatively in some way, so that their rights would be honored. This was particularly important in the Baltic states with the Russian minorities that lived there, because the Baltic states, as you can imagine, were not so inclined to be as generous, shall we say, with their Russian minorities as NATO, as being a NATO member would require. So we worked hard with them, the NATO group, and not just the US, worked hard with them on things like ensuring that Russian press could continue, that Russian language in schools could continue, that various other aspects of the community would be protected. Then, at the same time, of course, the Russians are coming to us really browbeating and saying, oh my God, how can you possibly enlarge NATO? The Warsaw Pact has gone away. This is ridiculous. You should be closing NATO just like the Warsaw Pact closed. Why are you doing this? This is an affront to us. And I said, well, the thing that's particularly important is that, for example, Russian minorities in the Baltic states are being protected. What are you doing? And I described all the things that NATO was doing to protect Russian minorities in the Baltic states. And I said, and what are you guys doing to protect the Russian minorities? After all, this is your interest to protect these minorities. What are you doing? And of course, the answer was a blank stare, like, what are you talking about? But for me, that was diplomacy in action, where you could actually make a difference. You could help countries understand things relevant to democracy and the like-minded nation part of NATO, and make some progress and have an effect.
Thank you. I'll turn to Russ now. 45 years in public service. That's 4 decades plus. It's very impressive, and it would be a great moment, I think, for us to hear some of your reflections back over the course of those years, what stands out.
So I would give exactly the same answer that Beth did, that I'd go back and do it in a heartbeat for sure. Remain an intelligence officer for the United States government, different than the Foreign Service. Our job is in some ways easier. We get paid to keep the facts straight, perform objective analysis, provide warning, and keep the debate intellectually honest. And I worked for a series of bosses who would say things like, do the right thing, tell the truth, do good government. Really easy people to follow, I had the opportunity to work Soviet military issues for the first portion of my career. I was stationed overseas. I worked counterterrorism for almost 15 years, several tours at the White House, 4 Democratic presidents, 4 Republican presidents. Would not have told one anything different than I told the other. We get paid to be objective, to try to help people who have to make policy have the very best information that they have. And all to the end of trying to keep the American public, our friends, our families safe. And what could possibly be better than that? You heard this morning that somebody indicated that, the working for the public sector may not be as lucrative, and you heard Victoria say that the private sector will pay you 18 times more. All true. But I'm sure, like Beth, I bought a house, I raised a family, put kids through college. It absolutely can be done. And I dare say you will not find work that is more rewarding than what we had the opportunity to do.
Right. We have someone with us who may one day be a diplomat, certainly in some form of public service. And Alexa, your trajectory is really interesting. You have a degree in international relations. I'm guessing that might be a theme across people in this room. You also, on your own volition, participate in youth summits. This is not Alexa's first youth summit. You have a big online presence, and you also dance, right? Those are a lot, it's an amazing mix, which I think speaks to something sort of beautiful about the generation that's coming up, that your work is not one thing. So let's stop for a minute on that last piece, the part about the arts and culture and dance. We have heard this morning about football, soccer, and diplomacy, but we haven't really talked much about that area, and you have that in you. So why don't you say a few words, tell us what we need to know about the everyday practice of democracy, actually, through the various things that you do in your life.
Well, I do circus and dance, and now I live in Montreal. The thing is about Montreal is that everyone from around the world, every circus performer worldwide comes to Montreal to train. And in that way, I get to learn on how to deal with different cultures and to have the understanding with one another. And that's what creates the magic in every show. And that also creates, I feel like being in a diverse community, especially the arts, can bring a show to life, because you could see the friendship between one another, the friendship I have with my circus counterparts. And I actually bring that to my dynamic in youth summits. So basically actually understanding different cultures and understanding different backgrounds could possibly prevent conflict and disagreements. And I learned that a lot in the circus industry, because not only are we focused on our training, but we're also focused on our friendship with one another. And that brings every show, and that brings every performance, it brings the greatness in every performance. And actually, the thing is with the circus, we have people coming in from China, we have people coming from Ukraine, we have people coming from Africa, and having that understanding and having that relationship with these people from these countries, it's a really inspiring thing, because I also get to know what's happening within their government and how their community works, and that's where I actually get my knowledge, but in youth summits, and especially in some places in Africa, where is that women don't have the same rights as men. I learned that a lot from my circus friends. And just being educated about that, and actually participating in youth summits and raising awareness about these issues, I feel like that's a step forward into a better society. And I learned that a lot as a performer, and I know it's very unusual for an artist to actually be in diplomacy and politics and participate in these youth summits, but I think increasing diversity within the diplomatic stage, and lessening the idea of having just political science, international relations students participate can actually, we can actually develop new policies, and in that way we can slowly change our world.
Thanks so much.
So-
So I do have a question coming in from online, but I would like a little bit of a response, both from you, Beth, and Russ, about the cultural piece. You've both lived in many places, really interesting places. Tell us what those places are and about maybe some like sort of off-duty cultural interactions that actually matter. Beth, do you have anything in mind?
The whole issue of culture, of music, of art, of dance is, I would say, integral to diplomacy. We don't have the funding now that we used to be able to bring American cultural groups to various countries. We used to be able to do a lot more of that, jazz ensembles or ballet groups or folk singers. But we still try to, as they're traveling anyway, we still try to bring them to our embassies and introduce them as a way to get a big audience. And that way, or not, that's not a big audience, an audience, so that you can have the conversations that Alexis is talking about with a group of people that you might would not normally meet in a foreign ministry or in the economics ministry. So for us, that's very, very important as an aspect of diplomacy, is to find people in the arts who have something to say about how their country runs, have something to say about democracy, basically.
This morning in the conversation about football, there was a lot about playing on the other side, on the other team to get to know somebody. Clearly that's not what your jobs were, but how do you actually get to know somebody who might be challenging and you might want to just have a human conversation with? Is that part of the cultural piece as well?
It absolutely is. I mean, one of the things I say, especially to my colleagues who are in the private sector, is that we in our business are really good at cold calls. We are really good at walking up to a person at a cocktail party or calling somebody whose name and phone number we have, has no idea who we are, and starting a conversation and getting enough of a grip that you can have a follow-up conversation. And especially with difficult people, if it's let's say you have to go talk to somebody about a difficult subject that you know they're going to hate, is nevertheless try to understand, think ahead of time, what are their needs and wants? What kind of argument can you make about whatever it is you want to get done that will draw them in a way that won't get you thrown out of their office? So for instance, when the Irish were very, very opposed to having any of our flights going to Afghanistan land in Ireland, and they were about to not allow us even overflight, but we needed them to land in Shannon for refueling. And I sat down with the Irish foreign minister when he came to Washington. I said, think about all those boys and some girls coming over to Ireland. They're coming for the very first time to a foreign country, and they want a beer. And wouldn't it be great if they had Irish beer on their way to Afghanistan or on their way to Iraq, whatever it was? And oh, by the way, that fuel that they're going to buy on all of these flights is probably a really good thing for the Irish economy. I mean, so it's that trying to figure out again needs and wants. What does he need? He wants all these kids to have a good sense of Ireland, and he wants income. And they permitted the flights.
Nice. So I'm going to read the question from the audience. If anybody else has a question, please go to the mic. It would be great to hear from you. So the first question that came in is this, and it's really for Russ and Beth. How is the role of diplomat or foreign service officer or intelligence analyst changed over the course of your careers? And would a graduate entering the field face the same challenges now, the same opportunities now, need the same skill sets now? Russ, can you start?
Sure. It's, from an intel perspective, it's dramatically changed. When I came in, there was this thing called the Soviet Union, and the pace of change was glacial. The intelligence community had kind of a monopolization of information. You fast forward 25, 30 years, we're not talking about massive nation states as much as we're talking about people and networks and the ability to understand what Al-Qaeda or ISIS is doing, or transnational criminal organizations, or counterintelligence organizations. And so the demands on my profession have grown astronomically. You've got a much bigger haystack. You're trying to find a much more subtle needle, and the ability, I would argue the imperative, to use machine learning and artificial intelligence that you've been hearing about for the last 4 or 5 hours are just going to be absolute, because there is no way we can possibly process the kind of information that we're getting in. We used to talk about multiple libraries of Congress coming into the IC every day. It's now an order of magnitude more than that. And so it's a much bigger challenge, and opportunities galore. So I would argue that we are looking far more for people who are good with data. I wish that we were testing for the mental acuity to process information more than we do. When I headed the National Counterterrorism Center effort to track identities. I had multiple PhDs and master's students that worked for me. The best person was a cop out of Richmond. She just had the ability to sense a situation. And so it is a different skill set for sure. But at the end of the day, now we're trying to deal with personnel networks, but we're also trying to deal with Russia, China. And so it's a really broad opportunity for young people coming into the community.
I would say that it's quite similar in one respect, and that is that it was a very narrow set of issues, a quite narrow set of issues that we dealt with when I first started in 1970, and a narrow set of targets. So we mostly only went to the foreign ministry and maybe a couple of other ministries. But fairly quickly, it became clear that we needed to expand that, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union. So it was very important that we go make friends in universities, make friends in various of the NGO groups, make friends with human rights defenders, make friends with lawyers groups, particularly women's lawyers groups, that kind of thing, to make sure we understood what civil society in all of these countries what were they doing, what were they thinking, how could they become advocates for some of the issues that we were trying to advocate for.
Thanks. I see a nice line, a queue, getting ready for questions. So first question, please step up.
This isn't a question. I'm just commandeering this microphone very quickly to thank you on behalf of veterans everywhere for ensuring that we were able to stop in Shannon to have some clam chowder and a beer before deployment. I can't tell you, that was a gift for all of us, truly. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariana and I'm coming from Canada to join you here today, so any fellow Canadians in the audience, hi. My question is to you, Mr. Travers. Since we are talking about diplomacy, we should also talk about something maybe opposite to that. And foreign actors often use different means to break up inclusion in the society. They build up hate narratives and they do various things. So how can governments, building upon your experience, right, with intelligence, protect their people from information operations, and how they can protect their societies from that? Thank you.
It's a huge issue. I would broaden it even further. Unfortunately, there are any number of actors within our countries that want to do the very same thing. And so the resilience, in my opinion, the resilience of our populations is going to be a function of their digital literacy and the ability to ferret out disinformation. There have been way too many studies that have shown that we're really bad at it, even up to the college level. The discussion you heard earlier about checking sources and so forth, we need to be far better at that than we are. Unfortunately, the Department of Education numbers would say that 53% of our population reads at a 6th grade level. You're asking a lot for them to be able to distinguish or even spend the time trying to distinguish some of these narratives. So we got a lot of work to do, for sure. But I guess the good news is that we recognize the problem. We're just going to have far more investment in sort of early education, I fear.
Thank you.
Next.
I just want to thank you all again for joining us today, and taking the time to speak with us. I had a question on, for all of you on reaching out. I would call it on a two-level diplomacy, on two-game theory, and reaching out to non-Western countries to, especially as they're hesitant to join us in support of Ukraine. I'm thinking about my own experience in Kazakhstan. There was, when I lived there, there was a lot of, yes, the United States is great, but we don't really trust you to look out for us. We don't think you're going to stay there, especially now that your support for Afghanistan seems a little iffy. So in terms of reaching out to officials and to the people, whether it's in Kazakhstan or in South Africa, how would you go about just, especially recommending for us to rectify this, to get them on our side, or maybe that's not the right language to be using, but to at least ensure that they don't go, everyone doesn't go to Russia or China?
It's a really good question. It's a question that is alive every day in the life of an American diplomat or an American, involved in foreign policy, because we do have an up and down record of support on various issues over the decades. It's something that all of you will be involved in as you're involved in any kind of foreign policy issues for the United States. There are a couple ways that we have tried to deal with it. One is to constantly talk about how important it is to keep these conversations going so that whatever country we're talking to, and I worked mostly in places like Kazakhstan and India and Pakistan, places like that, Middle East, where this was a very touchy subject. And just to say, let's keep talking about all these things, make sure we understand what you need, what you want, how can we help you, what are the best ways for us to be involved, and which other countries can work with us to do this, so that we really worked hard at not being just the United States doing X or Y. That was part of it. But the other was to turn it into, one of the reasons that we look mercurial is that we have a Congress that decides the budget. So we can't dictate to Congress what the budget should be for assistance to Pakistan or Indonesia or whatever it is. But we can advocate for that. And the best way for us to advocate that is for you to help us advocate for it by improving in whatever the issues were that we were trying to get a change in behavior in, so that we could go to Congress and say, the budget you've given us for Kazakhstan is really working on economic reform, but we need more to keep that going. So to try to turn it around that way.
So for me, I would say, since what I do is I take advantage of my social media and I preach in my social media and my Instagram and TikTok and in my website, and also I'm also part of a activist group. It's called Hallmark. So we have everyone from around the world join the group, and we communicate about policies. We had our leadership summit as well, and I talk to people coming from high-risk countries, from Kazakhstan. We have a lot of members from Africa, and we have people from Afghanistan who are Afghan refugees here. So I get to talk to them and communicate with them and to develop more policies. And I actually went with them in the World Bank Youth Summit. And I was able to actually meet people from all of these countries, where it's actually really interesting because 50 years ago, we don't have representation from these countries. And now, since the youth is actively involved and is motivated to actually help create more policies and to make the government better. So I think in that way, just by communicating with your community, you never really know where it's going to take you, and just actually being involved with NGOs and actually, taking advantage of your social media, because, social media, anyone could just watch it. So.
Terrific question and answer, and I want to follow up on it a little bit. Alexa, you were at the World Bank Summit.
Yes.
There, you met people from around the world, including Ukraine, right? Yeah, so tell us who that was, or you don't have to name if you want, but what did you learn? I mean, we've had so much conversation about Ukraine today. Mm-hmm. It seems to make sense that you would fill in some of the gaps.
So specifically on Ukraine, my youth counterpart and I, her name's Anna. So we talked a lot about women's empowerment and about the prevention of sexual violence, because as you guys know, a lot of Ukrainians right now are experiencing sexual violence from the Russian military. So we actually, so right now we're actually raising our voices and actually creating awareness to the youth, especially the youth nowadays are not very involved in foreign policy and are not very, some of them are not very, interested in actually taking part in youth summits. So right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to organizers to actually limit requirements so that these youth summits and these conferences can be accessible to everybody, so that people wouldn't, people would have the opportunity to actually listen to speakers and to actually talk to officials, because these people who are not, some of them who are not involved in political science, some of them are the ones that need help. So right now, what we have been discussing is to actually increase awareness and to actually develop policies, and that's what we did in the World Bank when we were talking to each other and what we can do with our NGOs, since she's also in an NGO. So right now, Hallmark, the NGO I'm a part of, so right now we're actually doing a collaboration with our NGO and to actually, make a change as much as possible as young activists. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for at least one more question. Let's see how quickly we can go.
Hi, first of all, thank you all so much for your time and being here today. My name is Kimberly, and I'm here with the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. And my question is for both Beth and Russ. What would you say has been the most rewarding part of your career? And kind of a follow-up question to that is, what advice do you have for individuals that are pursuing a career in the security field? And thank you so much.
Russ, go first.
Most rewarding probably after 9/11, we as a government came to the conclusion that we weren't sharing information correctly. We had far too many stovepipes. We needed to integrate our efforts on behalf of the government as a whole. And so I was part of the leadership team that stood up an organization called the National Counterterrorism Center. And rather than have a CIA and an NSA and a DIA and an FBI and a full alphabet soup of organizations, we brought all of them under the same roof to advance our efforts against Al-Qaeda after 9/11. In my opinion, that is the right model. I would like to see us pursue that for transnational organized crime, which kills far more Americans than terrorism ever will. But the ability to actually do good government and shape it in a way that I think defended our interests was probably the most rewarding for me.
My most rewarding experience comes after 9/11 as well. I was Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia when 9/11 happened, and we all met the next morning in our big conference room for our staff meeting. And my deputy said, we are the lucky ones. The entire world, certainly everyone in the United States, wants to do something about what just happened. We're the lucky ones because we get to do something about what just happened.
I'm sorry to not get in your question. We have to wrap, and what I really want to do, this is a youth summit. I want to give the last word to Alexa, and Alexa, you have a platform right now. You're speaking to your counterparts, but also you're on the stage with some seasoned individuals who have devoted careers to public service. What do you want to have the people who have experience that's long but different than yours know?
So just keep doing what you're doing. Just stay motivated and just keep fighting for your cause, because you never know where it's going to lead you. And just keep chasing your goals and just never give up, no matter how hard it is to reach your dream job. So, yeah.
And what do you want Beth and Russ to know?
I would say thank you so much for serving our country. Yes, and thank you so much for protecting American citizens, and especially the whole alliance. So.
Thanks so much to the three of you and to all of you as well.